Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Roundup here on bet.NOLA.com, brought to you by bet.NOLA.com, brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook and by Tulane Doctors. We appreciate their sponsorship, and we're excited to be here talking a little NFL draft today and what it means for both the rookies who were drafted, who might be in the best situation, and for the veterans who are either traded or who may be getting displaced by a rookie. And so, Spencer, lots to talk about. It's sort of it's the off season for fantasy.
Yeah, it is indeed the off season. I had a little trouble hearing you there, Zach, after that. But yeah, definitely, it's going to be a fun off season here as we prepare for training camp and all that, and see where all these careers ended up in decent spots as far as maybe having a little bit of value in 2 quarterback leagues as rookies. Pickett landed in Pittsburgh. He should be able to beat out Mitchell Trubisky at some point during the season and has a decent amount of weapons there. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and of course Najee Harris in the backfield. And then Desmond Ridder, in Atlanta, not offense there, not what it used to be, but he's got a couple of big targets in Kyle Pitts and Drake London. Ritter's biggest knock was his accuracy, but if he can't hit those guys, shame on him. And he also could win the job at some point early in the year, possibly, because Marcus Mariota not very stable there as the starter. And running backs, Kenneth Walker, I like to fit with the Seahawks, being that Chris Carson's neck injury is kind of taking a turn for the worse, to where he might have to end his career, unfortunately. So I think that's why they spent such a high pick on Walker. And Pete Carroll and the Seahawks, they love to run the football, so Walker should be able to slide it into the starting role there. All he'd have to beat out is Rashad Penny, who's very injury-prone himself, assuming Carson's out. James Cook, I like this spot. James Cook, younger brother of Dalvin Cook, landing with the Buffalo Bills. Feel like he'll do well there. Not necessarily as a runner, but as a receiver, a third down back getting receptions out of the backfield. That's what his role was in Georgia, more of the compliment to Zamir White. I think he'll be a compliment in Buffalo, but they're a high volume passing attack, and they don't really run a whole lot there. So maybe Josh Allen getting a lot of goal line looks. I just like Cook, though, because they have some vacated targets there. Cole Beasley gone, Emmanuel Sanders gone. Cook should be able to catch a lot of passes. And then Tyler Allgeier with the Falcons. I think Allgeier, he's a guy that's, did well with BYU. He might be in the best position out of any of these rookies, because with the Falcons, they have really no competition there. I know they got Cordero Patterson, but he's more of a receiver, like third down back type, a complimentary piece. He's not really a early down bruiser type. So I'm thinking Allgeier, if he can step into that early down role as a rookie, could put up a lot of fantasy points, being somebody that is good on early downs and should be able to get a lot of goal line work.
Yeah, I think the key to what you're saying here is this is so much about opportunity. These are not necessarily the rookies that pop the most on film. They're not necessarily the rookies you think are the best players, which is somewhat counterintuitive. But the idea is they have the best opportunity to have immediate success. And so when we look at these lists, we're looking at how they're going to do this season, not necessarily 5 or 10 years down the road, but what is their opportunity this season?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's the key to it. Fantasy, it's a lot about opportunity, because as we'll get to in the ones I don't like, is the best running back on film, I don't like as much from a fantasy standpoint because of his landing spot.
Yeah, and we'll talk about those in just a second. I did want to say I was having a couple of slow connection issues, but I did want to say that here on the Fantasy Roundup, we're brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. You can sign up if you're a new user. Go to NOLA.com/Caesars. You can get $1,100 bet insurance for your first bet. Pretty great deal. Anything you want to bet on, NBA playoffs, NFL futures, anything. If the bet loses, you get that money back in free bets, and you can bet it again. So, and if it wins, obviously, then you're off to a really great start on your account. So go to NOLA.com/Caesars for that. And then we're also brought to you by the Tulane Doctors. Tulane Doctors, innovative research, inspired patient care. Visit TulaneDoctors.com. So we thank them as well. And we'll move on. We talked about some quarterbacks and running backs, Spencer. Now, how about some wide receivers and tight ends you feel are in a pretty good spot? And I do want to bring up a comment first. Emmy Lou says, Andy Dalton. I don't know if Andy Dalton's a fantasy relevant quarterback unless Jameis Winston suffers another injury and you're maybe in a 2-quarterback league. But there is a New Orleans Saint on this next list.
Yes, there is, and that is Chris Olave. I'm really excited about what Olave could bring to the table. And we talk about opportunity. He's going to have plenty of it and could have even more than he was expecting if Michael Thomas's ankle doesn't respond, which it's not looking good right now. Hopefully, there's still plenty of time before the season, so he should be healthy by week 1. But the fact that it's still lingering after he missed all of last season, that's concerning to me. That tells me that was a really serious injury to the point to where I don't know if he'll ever be the same. I don't know if we'll ever see the old can't guard Mike when he set the record for receptions and all that. So Olave is going to be targeted early and often by Jameis. He can stretch the field, can do it all, really. He's a guy that the Saints traded up for him for a reason. He's going to be special. And then Treylon Burks, another receiver that landed in a great spot with Tennessee as far as having opportunities immediately with A.J. Brown no longer in town, shipped him off to Philadelphia. So, and it was funny, they traded him A.J. Brown, and then right after they did that, boom, they picked Treylon Burks. It was like, it felt like a puzzle. He got swapped one piece and put in another. You put in the younger version there of Trey Burks, a guy that can do a lot of things. A.J. Brown did well and should see a little work out of the backfield as well as being most likely the number 1 receiver there in Tennessee. And then Christian Watson landing in Green Bay. This one's a little tricky because he's somebody that I don't expect him to have a great start because, for one, he's a raw prospect coming out of North Dakota State, and 2, Aaron Rodgers typically doesn't like rookie receivers. But I feel like Rodgers is going to be forced to lean on Watson this season, especially down the stretch, because Sammy Watkins is not reliable, and neither is Allen Lazard or Randall Cobb, quite frankly. So I know Rodgers typically doesn't trust rookies, but as talented as Watson is, he might not have a choice. And then Jelani Woods, tied in with the Colts, huge athletic beast of a prospect. He's somebody he's another one that's a little bit of a project, but he's such a big target to where he might get 8 to 10 touchdowns, being that he's 6'6", 6'7", and has good receiving ability there out of Virginia.
Yeah, I want to circle back to Mike Thomas's ankle because this is going to be a big talking point for the rest of the summer, really, and even into the season. This thing is scary. And I mean, I think that's why you still hear the Saints rumored to be involved with Jarvis Landry, maybe still adding to that receiving room. There is something going on with that ankle that obviously no one expected a year ago because everyone was saying Michael Thomas would miss only a few weeks last season.
Yeah, for sure. It's really concerning because and then he ends up missing all of last season, missed half of 2020. It's like, I know it was a serious ankle injury. I think it was torn deltoid, and that's something that it's a ligament that typically, like, if that gets damaged, it can be bad. I'm pretty sure. I have to ask the Tulane doctors more about that. But anyway, it's just the point and bottom line, though, it's just very concerning for fantasy because I try and avoid injured players if possible. And if Thomas is still injured, if it's still lingering, then I don't see myself drafting him until they give him 100% clearance, full, clean bill of health.
Yeah, I drafted him in the mid rounds last year and got burned because you thought he was going to be back after 5 or 6 weeks. Oh, perfect number 2 receiver. I can slot him in. I've got a lot of value. Never turned out that way. And then you've wasted a really high pick. So that's a problem. And by the way, this is just so you know, Spencer the Guru is a Saints fan, but in no way is he biased. We saw a couple of Falcons on this list, Desmond Ridder, Tyler Allgeier. We see some Michael Thomas talk. So when he tells you Chris Olave is in a good spot, Chris Olave is in a good spot. But I do like what you said, Spencer, about Treylon Burks, because as you guys know, I've been all over him in the pre-draft process. I love that guy. And I'm not saying he's necessarily the same guy as A.J. Brown right away, but considering A.J. Brown is going to cost you a high draft pick, and you can probably get Treylon Burks, I don't know, 9th, 10th, 11th round. Like, Treylon Burks is a good player, and I think with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, he may continue to be a good player.
Yeah, so many opportunities for him, being that A.J. Brown's out of there. And yeah, really talented. Has a lot of talent, a lot of upside. And it's just Robert Woods is his real only threat for targets, and he's coming off a torn ACL and has never worked with Ryan Tannehill before. So the sky's the limit for Trey Burks, no doubt.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to some guys that maybe, and again, this is not to say they're not good players, but you don't like where they landed. And we'll start with quarterbacks and running backs here.
All righty, yeah, Malik Willis and Sam Howell is a simple fact that I don't really think they'll ever see the field this year. Sam Howell especially, being that he was such a late pick and stuck behind Heineke and Wentz. And then Willis, maybe at some point he can get the job over Tannehill, but I doubt it. I feel like Tannehill is still stable enough to where he'll keep the job all year. But if an injury would come up to Tannehill, Willis could have value, but it's just not a good spot for him to have immediate value, more of a dynasty play as opposed to redraft. And then the running backs, Breece Hall, I love Breece Hall. He was what I mentioned earlier, best running back on film, but it's just landing with the Jets. It's just, I don't know, especially I think he'll eventually take over, and I think he'll be the number one runner with the Jets, but it's just the thing that scared me a little bit is that they have a lot of Robert Saleh. He came from the 49ers, and we know how the 49ers do business, running back by committee. I don't think they'll be stupid enough to keep Breece in a committee for long, but Michael Carter did pretty well there last year, so might have to be a little patient with Breece Hall. Remember, even Jonathan Taylor's rookie year, he didn't really get going until the second half, so just be patient with Breece. Brian Robinson, didn't like his landing spot at all. Going to be stuck behind Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick, and then Ty Davis-Price. Don't like that one either. I don't know why the 49ers did that. My boy Elijah Mitchell, the local kid from UL, has had an amazing rookie year. They didn't need to add another running back. It's just such a muddied up running back room. Maybe Ty Davis-Price will be the Trey Sermon replacement because he did absolutely nothing as a rookie, but Eli showed enough last year to where even if Ty Davis-Price beats out Sermon, he's going to have a tough time getting many looks there.
This is a larger issue, I think, Spencer, in fantasy football, is that, okay, the 49ers keep bringing in quality running backs. Does that mean they don't like Elijah Mitchell anymore? I don't know if that's the case, but I think NFL teams look at running backs as not necessarily easily replaceable, but guys who are injury prone. Guys who maybe it doesn't make a ton of difference if you've got a guy who's a 9.1 out of 10 or an 8.7 out of 10. And so you throw them out there and you limit the carries for all of them, keep them healthy. And a lot more teams are going running back by committee. We've seen the 49ers do it. Like you talk about Breece Hall. I like Breece Hall too. I really like Michael Carter. I don't think it's a situation where Breece Hall is going to be the clear-cut number one running back for the Jets next year or the year after. I think it's a running back by committee. I think both of those guys are talented. Carter is obviously adept as a pass-catching back, and maybe he gets the third down role, and you see a sort of situation where we saw in Tampa Bay the last couple of years where you have Fournette and Ronald Jones, and you're guessing every week which one's going to pop. And it's just not a good situation, like you said, to waste a high draft pick on a guy like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the good thing with Fournette last year is in the second half, he pretty much established himself as the workhorse there and ended up with an RB1 finish. So I'm hoping Breece Hall can do the same. That's why I still like him, but be patient because it's going to be one of those things where he probably won't live up to his ADP immediately, or where you draft him. You're probably going to have to draft him in the third round, and in the early part of the year, he's probably going to be more like a middling flex play. You just got to hope he can make the most of his opportunities and show him that he's worth giving the ball to on all three downs.
Because Michael Carter, a good example, he was a borderline RB1 for the second half of last year until he got hurt. And so if you're telling me I've got to draft Breece Hall 3 or 4 rounds before I'm drafting Michael Carter, I think I'm out on that.
Yeah, for redraft, it's tough. I mean, but for dynasty, Brees Hall for rookie drafts, he's the first pick, and then he's probably at least worth a second, maybe even a first rounder. But yeah, redraft, it's tricky. I'd maybe consider him because of he also has that PPR upside, maybe in the third, like into the third round.
And so let's talk now about wide receivers and tight ends that landed in awkward spots in your eyes, Spencer. And just, hey, not that we don't like these players necessarily or that they can't be productive, but they're just not in the best spots.
Right. Yeah. Garrett Wilson, another Jet. The Jets are they're promising. Yeah, they won the draft, they won free agency and all that, but they're still a long ways away. They're still the doormat of the AFC East. Don't think just because they've got all this young talent, they're going to win now. I think in another year or two, they could be winning a lot of games, but right now they're a work in progress. And Garrett Wilson, very talented, but he's got competition for targets there. Corey Davis still there. Elijah Moore had a really nice rookie year last year. He ain't going away. So, yeah, Garrett Wilson, well, I think he's got a bright long-term outlook for this year. I probably wouldn't trust him because he's going to – with Zach, and I don't really trust Zach Wilson either, quarterback. So, if he's going to have an inconsistent quarterback and competition for targets, that's generally not a recipe for success. Same thing with Jameson Williams. I don't trust Jared Goff in Detroit. I know Jameson's progressing really well from his torn ACL, might be ready to go for week 1, which would be amazing, but I don't expect him to do a whole lot as a rookie, being that Goff has a noodle arm and probably won't be able to utilize Williams' best skill set, which is stretching the field deep. And then Wan'Dale Robinson, the Giants are a complete mess at wide receiver right now, and I'm not sure where Wan'Dale fits in and all that. They spent a high pick on him, so I'm sure he'll see the field, but I don't see him being very consistent with Daniel Jones at quarterback. And then Jeremy Ruckert picking on the Jets again, but for real life, the Jets are doing things right. They've got a lot of depth there at receiver and tight end, but he's got 2 veterans in front of him there with Uzama and Tyler Conklin. So no hope for Ruckert as a rookie, I don't think.
Yeah, and by the way, thank you, Barry. We're going to try to get you to that finish line in fantasy football season long, and DFS as well this fall. So stick with us. I will disagree with you on a couple of points, maybe minor, Spencer. I like Wan'Dale Robinson. I do think it was a little bit of a weird draft pick for a team that already had Kadarius Toney, that already kind of has that skill set. But I really like Wan'Dale Robinson. And then as far as the Jets go, let me bounce this off of you. We can sit here and say, okay, Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson, they landed in the wrong place because it's the Jets and they're still the doormats and everything. I look at this and say, I think this is a pretty good situation for Zach Wilson going forward. Like, I think he could take a little bit of a jump.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. It's just, I don't really, my thing is I don't trust Zach Wilson. He'll have more to work with this year, but I didn't like him coming out of BYU. I thought it was outrageous that he was the second pick because prior to his breakout year in 2020, I mean, he didn't seem like he was anything special. I know he's got a lot of upside, but I just don't trust him to be consistent enough. We'll see. I mean, this is his year to show that if he's going to take a leap, he needs to do it because that AFC East it's not getting any easier. So he's going to have to step up.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is true. But to me, Zach Wilson showed some flashes last year. They get him some more weapons. We'll see what the offensive line is like. But I think there's a possibility that the Jets may be at least not at the very bottom of the barrel anymore, at least as far as fantasy is concerned. Moving on and talking now some veteran players. Obviously, some of these guys changed teams. Some of them didn't change teams, but they did see their situations change. If the quarterback room changed in their facility, or the running back or wide receiver room changed, that can change their opportunities. So here's a list of 4 guys that you think improved their situation. We'll call it they won, considering the happenings of draft weekend. Like Marquise Brown gets traded to the Cardinals. Jalen Hurts, though, he got some extra weapons like A.J. Brown.
Yeah, he sure did. Yeah, Jalen Hurts stock goes up a lot because with A.J. Brown, with that acquisition, that tells me they're going to be more committed to the pass this season. Last year, I believe they were the most run-heavy team in the league, and Jalen Hurts was pretty fantasy-friendly because he got all those rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. But I think his value goes up a little bit, though, because I still think he'll get a good amount of rushing, and his passing numbers should skyrocket with A.J. Brown in town. I know he's not the best passer, but now he's got weapons there with A.J. and Devontae Smith, so I think he'll throw for a lot more than he did last season. And then a couple of Cardinals there, James Conner and Marquise Hollywood Brown. Really like Hollywood, especially with the news of DeAndre Hopkins getting suspended for 6 games. And even if Hopkins wouldn't have gotten suspended, I'd still like it because he's getting to go work with his old college quarterback, Kyler Murray, and they had a really good connection in Oklahoma. So I'm thinking in a more pass-friendly offense there in Arizona, Cliff Kingsbury's air raid attack, that Hollywood should have a career year. And then James Conner, it's more of a product of that. They didn't draft a running back very high. They drafted Keontae Ingram, I believe, late, but they took him late enough to where I don't think he'll take many carries away from Conner, who thrived as the workhorse last year, scored double-digit touchdowns. And then Cole Kmet, I think, could be a sneaky value because the Bears didn't really address their receiver room. They drafted the Velus Jones from Tennessee, but that's about it. Their receiver room is very thin, especially with no more Allen Robinson. So I think Cole Kmet's target should go up this year. And he actually did okay last year, other than he didn't have any touchdowns. So if he could find the end zone this season, he could be a potential starting caliber tight end as a guy that's just going to get volume.
Yeah, no, I think that those are right on the money. And now we're going to get to some guys, some veterans who maybe their situation got a little murkier. Maybe, not. Again, opportunity is everything. You have to pay attention through training camp to see how some position battles work out. But tell us about these guys who you really got to keep an eye on now.
Right, yeah, Ryan Tannehill definitely takes a hit. Now they drafted Malik Willis. That tells me they're not at all invested in Tannehill as a long-term solution. He'll just be there probably for the next year, maybe one more. But, yeah, his days are numbered as a starting quarterback. And I think the pressure might get to him because he recently in an interview he had said that he was just like he was distraught after the playoff loss, and then he was mad about losing A.J. Brown. It's like now they drafted Malik Willis, and he's not going to mentor him. It's just Tannehill is like his whole world's crumbling in front of him, and I don't know, that just can't be good. I mean, maybe it'll give him a chip on his shoulder and he'll do well, but I don't know, man. When you lose your best receiver and it's a run-first team, I don't like that, the prospects there. And then Michael Carter, obviously a big loser with Breece Hall in town. Michael Carter, he showed a lot of promise in the second half last year, but I think he's better served as a compliment. I mean, heck, he was a compliment in college to Javonte Williams, so I think he'll be okay as a compliment, but he might get overdrafted because people might see his numbers from last year and be like, "Ooh, this guy could be a starting running back." Well, not over Breece Hall. Not over Breece Hall. Breece is a beast. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, a loser in my eyes because Jameson Williams getting drafted and then trading up for him. That tells me the Lions do not believe in Amon-Ra to be a number one receiver, which he was last year down the stretch. He put up some big numbers, won a lot of people fantasy championships, but those numbers are going to come back to earth. I think he's better served as the number 2 or the slot guy type thing. And then Albert O, a loser there with the Broncos because they took Greg Dulcich pretty high. So that tells me they might not be too sold on Albert O. And they ran a lot of 2 tight end stuff with Noah Fant last year. Noah Fant was the main guy. I think Albert O could maybe still have some potential, but with Dulcich there, it's not a sure thing.
I will say about Albert O, though, this is not draft related, but going from Drew Lock to Russell Wilson, or Teddy Bridgewater to Russell Wilson, that could help him.
Yeah, I'll say he was a winner after free agency, and then after the draft, he was a slight loser because of the Dulcich thing. But I guess overall, if we're talking like before the all season started, he'd probably still be an overall winner because of Russ.
What about A.J. Brown? He wasn't on either of your lists. Are you still drafting him as high as you would have last year now that he's in Philly?
Yeah, he's a tricky case, because he's a guy that I don't see his stock changing all that much because he's going from one low volume passing attack to another. So, and he's an efficiency guy. His efficiency's been there, and he's just he's a lot of people are saying he won by going to Philly, but I don't really see that because they still have Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, and they're just not a high volume passing team. So if anything, he might have a slight stock down going there because they have more competition for targets. So I don't think it's anything drastic. I think he's still like a low end wide receiver one with like a third round pick. But I have a feeling I won't be getting too many AJ Brown shares this year like I normally do. He's usually one of my guys, but with going to the Eagles, I think people are going to get too hyped up over that offense's potential and end up overdrafting him.
And I mean, look, we talk about Jalen Hurts being a winner, but I think it remains to be seen if Jalen Hurts can thrive as a high volume passer. He's never really been asked to do that. So there's a bit of uncertainty there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he'll definitely improve, but yeah, I definitely don't see him being a high volume. I think because last year he was low volume. Hopefully this year it'll be more like mid-pack, and even if he's mid-pack, that's a big step up over what he was last year, being near the bottom in attempts.
Right, but it does raise the question, like you said, I think correctly with AJ Brown. Like, I don't know if this is a great situation. I mean, he's obviously very talented. He's going to put some numbers up. But I don't know if the trade was definitely a good thing for him with Devontae Smith on the other side, and as you said, Dallas Goedert getting some getting some of those targets, and so we'll see. Well, let's kind of put it all together, an overview, and we're going to be back with you in July and start really doing some pre-draft work here on the Fantasy Roundup, and start really drilling into where you ought to target guys, whose ADP is too high, whose is too low, maybe some auction values, things like that. We'll really hit that hard once training camp starts. But for right now, let's take a look. Now, Spencer, this is a mock draft you did, or by yourself, or with friends, or what are we looking at here?
Oh, this is a Guru Nation mock draft from last night. We do mock draft Monday. This is actually our first of the year as far as, for redraft, like for the 2022 season. I had done a few solo ones, but I wanted to include this one since it was with all real people, no robots. And this is a real live draft went down last night on Instagram. It was a good time chopping it up with the community over there. If y'all aren't already following, y'all go check that out at Spencer The Guru. But yeah, this mock was a lot of fun. Had some interesting results there.
Christian McCaffrey, number 2, surprises me. Did that surprise you?
Oh, it did, man. It did. Yeah, actually, my buddy from the fantasy, what was his show? I was on his podcast, so the Fantasy Fan Line. He picked second there, took McCaffrey, and I was surprised because I picked third and grabbed Austin Eckler. I was thinking I'll just take whoever makes it to me out of Najee and Eckler, because right now my top 3 is JT, Najee, and Eckler, because I don't really trust Christian McCaffrey as a top 3 pick anymore. His injury history over the past 2 years has been very concerning. Like we talk about Michael Thomas, it's just like, I mean, it's funny because they both had big 2019 seasons. I believe that was when they both when McCaffrey had the yards from scrimmage record and Thomas had the receptions record. But ever since then, they've both hardly been on the field since they had those record seasons. And so with the injuries, I just can't take him that high. I could maybe take him like 5th, 6th, maybe 4th, but even that's a little bit of a stretch for me because he's going to have to show me he can stay healthy. It makes me nervous.
Was this a PPR?
It was.
Okay. I will say Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams, clearly the top 2 wide receivers. Adams going to Las Vegas, not working with Aaron Rodgers anymore. Derek Carr still very talented, but and obviously they have history from college, but anytime you see a change, a guy like Devontae Adams, you wonder, is he going to stay at the top? My question is, Kupp and Adams, I would personally be willing to draft either of those guys in the top 5, especially in a PPR.
Okay, yeah, I've got Justin Jefferson ranked ahead of Adams because I do think Adams' numbers drop slightly. He'll still be near the top of the charts for sure, but I'm going from Rodgers to Carr. The Raiders also have Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow. I mean, he'll still be dominant, but I wouldn't take Adams quite that high. But yeah, Kupp and maybe even Jefferson for me. I think you can make a case that they're top 5 picks.
Yeah, I mean, if I could get any of those 3 guys down around 8, 9, 10, I'm pretty happy, I think. Because look, we talked about this during the season. Fantasy football has long been the domain of the dominant running back. And that's still true. I mean, if you have the number 1 pick, you're probably still taking Jonathan Taylor. You're still going to be real happy if you end up with Derrick Henry or Austin Eckler. But there just aren't as many dominant running backs. And the receivers are safer picks. I mean, they're more likely to stay healthy. They're more likely to fall into a sort of timeshare situation. And in a PPR, they're going to be just as high scoring.
Right. Yeah. Kupp, I believe, was actually the leading scorer in PPR last year over JT. As great as JT was, Kupp was actually the top scorer. So, but yeah, I love Cooper Kupp. Obviously, who doesn't? He's a stud. He's a triple crown receiver. But I do think his numbers drop slightly. I don't think he's going to repeat last season's production. So just keep that in mind before you want to be like, well, he had the most points. I'm taking him first overall. There is some regression coming there.
You got to be careful, and we're going to talk some fantasy baseball here to wrap things up in a minute. But you have to be careful. The regression monster works in both ways, right? Like a guy who underachieved last year, you might be able to get some value on him this year. A guy who overachieved, and as great as Cooper Kupp is, to ask him to do again what he did last year is asking a lot. Number 1, he's got to stay healthy all year. Number 2, he's going to be facing a lot more double and triple teams early in the season than he did last year. And just number 3, I mean, is he going to be able to perform? Will his opportunities be there in the red zone? Will the drops increase a little bit? I mean, anything at all that drops off just a little bit, and Cooper Kupp is no longer a top 3 pick. I mean, he's still obviously a very good player, but if we're talking value, you've got to be careful with that.
Yep, got to get guys at a value, and to me, no receiver is worth it that high in the top 3. And then the way it is, the running backs, considering they're so scarce, it's just the receivers. There's more depth there. So I'm still going to go with the old school mentality. If I get a top 3 pick, I'm going with a running back.
All right, let's switch gears. You're watching the Fantasy Roundup on bet.NOLA.com. Talked a lot of NFL draft results and what that means for the fantasy football season coming up in the fall. But the season going on right now in the fantasy community, of course, besides you can play fantasy golf, fantasy NASCAR, things like that. But the season long that's going on is fantasy baseball. And we're about a month into this, almost exactly a month into the season, actually. So let's talk some of Spencer's biggest surprises and disappointments so far in fantasy baseball. And we'll start with the guys who have exceeded expectations, exceeded where they got drafted. And Taylor Ward has got to be at the top of every single one of these lists.
Yeah, definitely. He's a guy that wasn't even drafted in most leagues, and he's having an amazing season. Been one of the best hitters in all MLB. Yeah, that's a huge surprise. With the Angels, people talk about Joe Adele and Brandon Marsh, but yeah, Ward's been the guy to have there as far as their young guys. Of course, they've got Trout and Ohtani, but yeah, they finally. I think this might finally be the year the Angels break through and make the playoffs because yeah, they've got a lot of talent, and Ward is definitely one of the reasons why they're winning. Then Andres Gimenez with the Guardians is having a nice season. He's someone I wanted no part of him this year because I took him a year too early last year. He was terrible, got sent to the minors, but he's been rolling this year. He's hitting lights out and at a thin second base position, which there's been a lot of second basemen that have stunk it up so far this year. Gimenez has been a very pleasant surprise, and then a lot of pitchers. This has been the year of the pitcher so far with offense, especially home runs down. Zach Gallen has been amazing there for the Diamondbacks. He's somebody I didn't really look his way too much, being that the Diamondbacks were expected to be terrible, but Gallen has been a true ace so far. And then Miles Mikolas from my Cardinals has put up a heck of a year. Not a big strikeout guy, but I mean, if he keeps his ERA in the ones, he's got to keep him on your roster. I'm not saying he'll keep that up, but he's pitched good enough now to where it's been over a month in. He's been too good to ignore. I think he's figured something out. And then Daniel Bard been a really good closer there for the Rockies. Always tough to pitch in Colorado, but Bard's been been a lockdown option there for them in the ninth inning.
Taylor Ward, by the way, leads the major leagues in batting average, on base percentage, slugging percentage, obviously OPS. He leads the major leagues in walks. He's hit 6 homers. He had 15 career homers in 4 years as really a part-time player. And he's got 6 already this year, and he's even added a stolen base. So, like, if you picked up Taylor Ward, or maybe you drafted him late, he had a good spring, or you picked him up that first week when you saw it, like, good for you. You're probably doing real well right now because he has been dynamite. Now, the question here is, as we look back at this list one more time, are you trying to sell high on any of these guys? Are you trying to sell Taylor Ward high? I mean, he's probably not going to OPS 1165 the rest of the year. Now, could he still OPS 950 or 1,000? Yeah, he could. But do you try to trade him maybe for a guy who has struggled so far, who you think is better the rest of the year?
Right. Yeah, I'd suggest sell high on all of these guys if you can, because there's no way. I mean, Daniel Bard might keep it up. I think he's legit as far as his strikeout rate. Maybe Gallen. But, like, all the other ones, like, even them, though, I mean, there's no way. We know how baseball is. If you get off to a hot start, odds are you're going to cool off. You know, there's nobody that can stay hot all year. Even somebody as good as Manny Machado, I would say you might want to look into trading him, because he's been so good. These guys have been so good that it's like they're not going to keep this up. And a lot of people tend to have recency bias, and they see somebody with juice numbers and they're like, oh, I got to have this guy on my team. And then you could maybe pick up a stud that's not off to quite as good of a start, or get, if you're lacking in depth, get like 2 or 3 pretty good players that have upside. Like in baseball, things can turn around in an instant. Like Jared Walsh, for example, another Angel. He had started off kind of slow, but this past week he's hit like 3 home runs already in the past the week just getting started. Last week, I think he hit like 3-4 home runs. I was like, man, I'm glad I didn't get rid of him. Yeah, it's just things can turn around in a hurry.
Yeah, I mean, again, not to pick on Taylor Ward, because I do think part of this breakout is for real, and I think the Angels have another good player, and I agree with you. They're going to make the playoffs this year. But his first 4 years, which, again, part-time player, he played in 159 games. I'm looking at the stats right now. His rookie year of 2018 through 2021, he played in 159 games, so basically one full-time season. His batting average was 230. Okay, on base was 305. Slugging 388. Not terrible, but a slightly below average player. Now, has he found something? Has he improved? I think the answer is yes. Is he going to be – he's hitting 364. That number is – I'm going to say his batting average by the end of the year will end up closer to 230 than it does 364. Now, that still might mean he hits 295. But, you're just – the true talent level is somewhere in between those two things. And so by selling high, you can't think of it as, oh, he's been the anchor of my lineup. He's hitting 364. I can't get rid of him. Think of it more as, I'm going to go find somebody who thinks he's going to hit 350 the rest of the year, and I'm going to get, I don't know. I don't know if you can get Bo Bichette for him, for instance, who's struggled just a little bit. I don't know if you're going to find anybody that gullible, but you could go get a talented guy who maybe hasn't played great yet and give up Taylor Ward and end up better in the long run.
Yeah, Tyler O'Neill's an example of that with my Cardinals. He's been
go.
off to a little bit of a slow start, but in that lineup, the Cardinal lineup's loaded. So I think his breakout's going to come here soon.
All right, so now let's look at the other side of the coin. Let's look at guys who have disappointed so far. And, of course, the opposite question here is, how many of these guys are you looking to buy low? Or are they guys who, hey, something's wrong and I'm staying away? Now, part of this can be health. You talk about Zach Gallen. Zach Gallen had a pretty good, I believe it was 2019 season, but he's been hurt basically ever since then. You can't, so again, is he a guy you want to sell before he gets hurt again? Well, let's look at some guys who have been disappointments so far with the backdrop of how many of these guys are you saying they're going to bounce back and they're worth going to try to buy low versus something's wrong here and I'm staying away?
Gotcha. Yeah, I would say, Marcus Semien, man, he's off to a terrible start going over to the Rangers, as well as Trevor Story, both big free agent additions. I do think Semien turns it around. I mean, he's too talented not to. He's coming off a career year, and, to change the scenery, he's probably not the best, being that he was in a stacked lineup with the Blue Jays, but he's got to get better than he's been. He's got no home runs. The dude hit like over 30 last year. So I think he's going to shake back. Trevor Story, though, I don't know. The Red Sox lineup looks bad right now. And Story's a guy, he's been a career Coors Field guy there with the Rockies. And we all know how
the
Coors
Red Sox.
Field,
I'm sorry, Spencer. The Red Sox have all been struggling offensively. It's been an epidemic in Boston.
yeah, it really has. And I think Story, I think they may have messed up by giving him big money because he just I don't know, and in the position change and in the going away from Coors Field, it's been a disaster so far. And while I think he's obviously not going to stay hitting 200 all year, I just don't see him being anywhere near what he used to be. He's just no longer a good fantasy option. He's just more a guy that's just going to be, I think, just a guy you could stream here and there when he's hot, but overall he's no longer like a set it and forget it option. And then Whit Merrifield's been just horrendous this year. I don't know what's going on there. I hope he can turn around. I think he will. He's a guy that's been usually very consistent throughout his career, but so far it's been rough, man. He has done nothing. But the Royals, if they're off to a bad start, I think they'll do a little better offensively moving forward. And then a couple of pitchers on their starters, Charlie Morton and Tyler Mahle. Charlie Morton, I think it's just age with this one, man. It's just he's just getting up there. And we all know when you get over the hill, there's no coming back a lot of times. Once you lose it, you usually can't find it when you're that age. He's, I think, like 38 or something, and he's just been consistently struggling, and I don't really see him turning it around to where the way, at least to how he used to be. I think he could improve somewhat from what he's doing now, but I think he's in some trouble there. Same thing with Mahle. I think Mahle, as far as his, his stuff, I think he'll find that. I think he might have a little more hope than Morton, being that he's younger, but the Reds are just so dreadful to where even if he does turn it around, he's not going to get any wins.
Yeah, and his walks per nine are up, his strikeouts per nine are down. Look, he's got a 6.46 ERA. It's going to get better than that. But I don't know that his ceiling is where everybody thought it was. Now, the good thing about fantasy baseball is you can afford to be a little more patient than you can with football, right? Where a guy's struggling, stick with him for a few more weeks, see if he turns it around. A guy is really hot. Maybe don't believe it's going to keep up all year long. And also on the flip side, be on the lookout for guys like that. You can find some trades. I mean, I talked about this last year. I traded Shohei Ohtani at the All-Star break last year, which I think was the right move. I mean, if y'all remember, he had 35 home runs, 37 home runs at the All-Star break, and only hit like 11 more after that. And I got extreme value for him. Now, the problem was the guy I got for him was Jacob deGrom, who was immediately hurt, and I never got a single start out of him. But I also got Austin Riley in the deal, who ended up having actually a better second. So even though I whiffed on deGrom and was unlucky there, Austin Riley actually outproduced Shohei Ohtani as a hitter in the second half. Now, Ohtani also had pitching value, obviously. And so anyway, it's tough, but sometimes you have to do the difficult thing and say, as much as I've enjoyed having this guy on my team and rooting for him and checking the box scores every night, it may be time. This may be the time to pull the trigger on a trade.
Yep, that's very true, Zach. Yeah, you gotta sell high when you can. I have trouble doing that. You have somebody that's been performing for you all year, and you're like, man, that's my guy. I can't trade him. But sometimes you gotta do the tough assignment there, because if you don't, then they're not gonna keep that up all year. That's just how baseball is. It's a game of streaks and trends, whatever you want to call it. It's maddening a lot of times, because it doesn't make sense on a weekly basis how a guy can hit 400 one week and then 100 the next. You're like, man, this is nuts. But that's the fun of it, though. It's very unpredictable. You just gotta be disciplined. I find is a big key with it, because usually the cream ends up rising to the top.
That's a good word for it. It's not like football, fantasy football, where you're living and dying with every game and checking your box score all day Sunday and Monday night, and oh, come on, get me 10 more yards, get me another touchdown. I need this touch. There are days I don't even check my fantasy baseball scores. I'll check my lineups to make sure I have my starting pitchers in. but I'll go a couple days before because you can get really tied up in this guy's been 0 for 4 3 straight days. I'm going to cut him. Whoa, slow down. 3 games is 1/50th of the season. And it doesn't take, as we all know, it doesn't take a whole lot of hits to get back up to like a 280 average from that point. So then a couple of 2 for 4s later, and he's doing just fine. You have to be patient, especially in leagues where you're limited on the number of moves you can make, things like that. Just, be careful, be patient, and all of that. But before we go, Spencer, one more baseball question for you. A lot of talk earlier this year about rookies. We talked Bobby Whit Jr. Of the Royals. We talked Julio Rodriguez of the Mariners. We talked Mackenzie Gore, the pitcher with the Padres. Saya Suzuki, the Japanese import rookie for the Cubs. Varying degrees of success. Suzuki started out real hot. He's gone into a little bit of a slump. Rodriguez and Whit really struggled early. Julio is showing some signs of coming out of it. He actually leads the major leagues in stolen bases that I don't know anyone would have predicted. He's got 10 stolen bases. Has your opinion on any of these rookies changed, first of all, for this season, and second of all, for long term?
Not too much, honestly. The rookies gotta be patient with him. Bobby Witt Jr., he's gonna bounce back. He's a great buy low candidate right now. I didn't include him on the disappointments because at least he's been stealing bases. That's kept him afloat. But yeah, you just gotta be patient with these rookies there. CJ Abrams is another one for the Padres where they just, they haven't really popped off yet, but MLB, it's a league where it's not a sport that's dominated by rookies. It's very rare that a rookie comes in and just tears it up. So you got to be patient. Heck, even Vlad Jr. as a rookie didn't really get going until the second half. So yeah, I think these guys will be just fine. My opinion on them is that if they've got that much talent, they should do it. They should come through. But yeah, just don't expect them to be superstars as rookies.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you're right. If they're giving you something, like Bobby Witt Jr.'s got 5 stolen bases. Julio Rodriguez, by the way, was 3 for 4 last night and has got his average up to 255. So, he's not the black hole. He was 100 points lower than that like a week ago. And so if you're 255 and he's leading the league in stolen bases, I can live with that. I'm not cutting that guy. He's only got 1 home run, but the home runs I think will come too. And so you got to be patient and realize that these guys have the pedigrees that they have for a reason.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and then, Julio, leading the league in stolen bases. That's another good thing with these young guys. Even if they're not hitting right away, like we were thinking, they all young guys, they like to steal bases. Get something going in that department. And stolen bases are hard to come by these days with so many veterans opting to just not even mess with trying to steal bases. So yeah, that's another added perk of these rookies is that they tend to be aggressive on the base paths, and that's always a good thing for fantasy.
All right, so that is Spencer the Guru Urquhart, and this has been the Fantasy Roundup on bet.nola.com. If you missed any of the show, it will be available later this afternoon on demand on bet.nola.com. We talked a lot of NFL draft, where rookies landed, what it might mean for some veterans. And then we talked some baseball surprises and disappointments through the season's first month. I tell you what, as I said, in July, we'll be back just about every week talking fantasy football and getting you ready for the season. Until then, it'll still be a little hit or miss. Might do another show next month. Check back in on the baseball season. Check in on some last minute fantasy football free agency moves and see what happened with that. And also check in on some fantasy golf. The U.S. Open is next month. Of course, the PGA Championship next week, but we'll talk some DFS, golf, and NASCAR as well. So until then, our producer, Devin Jackson, and Spencer the Guru Urquhart, I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching the Fantasy Roundup.